Welcome back. I'm Peter St. Onge. This is a weekly roundup of my daily videos on the economy and freedom, where I cut through the BS and lay out what the gaslighting clowns pulled out of their hats this week and what is coming next. One in 5 college students now does math and reading at the level of a 10-year-old. A 10-year-old paying $150,000 to study systemic oppression from a 29-year-old adjunct who lives in a Kia. A new OECD report finds that almost 1 in 5 American college students are at primary school level, which is fascinating considering public school spending doubled to nearly $18,000 per student. Yet, according to gold standard PISA scores, K-12s are losing an entire grade level per generation. Budget goes up, education goes down. It's blowing up since COVID. At UC San Diego, the share of first-year students showing up with primary school math exploded 30-fold in just 5 years. Interestingly, fully 1 in 4 of those math illiterates had received perfect math scores in high school. In case you wonder what they're doing in school, it ain't math. At Berkeley, up to 30% of students in calculus show, quote, severe deficits forcing professors to reteach the courses they allegedly already passed. That's Berkeley, one of the top universities also allegedly in the world. Even at Harvard, professors say they're shortening readings because students cannot handle complex prose or sustained attention. So how did we get here? Easy progressives captured government schools, turning them into indoctrination centers. One study found public school swings kids 20 points Democrat compared to private and religious schools. The most progressive districts, last year, 23 Baltimore schools had precisely 0 students proficient in math. In Detroit, 96% of students lack proficiency in math, 95% cannot read. Note, Baltimore and Detroit spend a third more per student than the rest of the country. Faced with quasi-illiterate high school grads, colleges have all but abolished standardized testing in favor of essays and soft assessments that let them sell degrees to the unprepared and let them dodge the Supreme Court ban on racial preferences. Can't prove discrimination if there are no standards. Almost 9 in 10 universities now have discarded standardized test requirements like SAT or ACT. That's up from half before the Supremes banned race. This all leaves the last man standing for accountability in our trillion-dollar education Ponzi, grades, which you'll be shocked to know are now meaningless. The percent of high school graduates with A or A+ more than doubled in the past 10 years, hitting more than half. 54% of high school grads had straight A's in math. Remember, 1 in 5 are at 10-year-old level. Gets worse at college. At Yale, for example, also allegedly one of the best schools in the world, fully 79% of students get straight A's. Meanwhile, professors are apparently unable to figure out what's done by AI. One study of 500,000 grades found that since ChatGPT, the most AI-doable courses like creative writing had a 30% jump in grades compared to the others. In short, the education system has become a trillion-dollar counterfeiting, cranking out $150,000 college degrees and $250,000 worth of K-12 that are nearly meaningless. So what's next? The solution for K-12 is easy: give power back to parents instead of communist education unions. So vouchers, school choice, homeschooling, private and parochial schools that are allowed to set their own standards and curriculum. For universities, a return to standardized testing and in-person proctored exams so they can prove if they're actually teaching anything. America will not remain the top economy in the world if kids are being indoctrinated instead of educated. The unions and colleges will fight hard. For them, this is existential. But if the system does not change, a no-skills Gen Z will continue voting to burn it all down. Legacy media could lose half its audience as people go to AI instead. Can journalists learn how to walk a dog? For a century, the media has told us they are democracy's immune system when it turned out they are democracy's cancer, and AI is the chemo. According to a new Pew study, when Google puts an AI summary at the top of search, it gobbles up 92% of the audience, leaving just 8% to visit CNN. Now, keep in mind that's just Google's AI. Toss in people who just go direct to ChatGPT or Grok instead of wading through a 1,200-word New Yorker hit piece on Trump's helipad. So bad, major sites are now delisting from Google, throwing away their main audience source to stop Google scraping their content. So the background is before AI media was simple, write the story, optimize for Google clicks, sell ads. Google would scrape your content, sure, but they paid you in eyeballs. With AI, you get the summary and punchline for free. The actual articles got to sing for its supper. And turns out, not many articles can sing for their supper, with Reuters projecting search traffic to news sites will fall nearly half in 3 years with no end in sight. Of course, it's not just the AI. Media shot itself in the foot, throwing away credibility and authority for nakedly partisan reporting. Trust in traditional media is down to just 1 in 4 Americans and 1 in 7 Republicans. That's hit media consumption to the point most Americans get their news from social media and AI chatbots already, not traditional media. That's where it gets interesting because the eyeballs are not going away, they are migrating. Joe Rogan famously is the most popular podcast in the world. Substack has grown 5-fold since 2021. Hundreds of YouTubers you have never heard of get more views than the entire CNN universe. Tucker's interview with Donald Trump got nearly 250 million views, which is roughly 80 times his Fox audience. AI accelerates all of this because it replaces left-wing media slop with multiple points of view, and often by people who know the topic much better than journalism majors who are experts in literally nothing. This matters because even with CBS and maybe CNN now going conservative, we're still swamped by the communists and media, but those commanding heights themselves are evaporating. Very roughly, the internet itself, so social media and blogs, took us from a media that was almost monolithically dominated by progressives. In the 1970s, before Fox and Rush, you could probably fit the entire conservative media into a living room, and it took it to maybe 2/3 legacy media and 1/3 independents before AI. That was already driving mass layoffs and consolidation with the number of journalists in America, newspapers down nearly 3/4, and even TV laying off in the face of YouTubers and independents. If AI is now coming for half the audience, that alone takes us to a world with a roughly 50-50 split in media between independents and implying another major contraction for legacy media. Layoff analyst Challenger Gray estimates media layoffs are now running 20,000 a year, which is about 1 in 10 remaining journalists every year, while independent creators, of course, explode. So as next, aside from their corruption, our supposed intellectual elite is characterized by a kind of ideological DEI, where the people on top are surprisingly second-rate for the authority they command. You probably noticed this during COVID. Now that AI can replace second-rate in about 3 sentences, that elite is running on fumes. Give it another 10 years, and we will not have a legacy media. A word from our sponsor. If you own gold, and many of you do, you already understand how it protects your wealth from the insanity coming out of Washington. The inflation, the recessions, the wars. But with monetary metals, there's a way to actually earn a yield of up to 4% on your gold paid in more ounces of gold. You retain ownership of real, allocated physical gold with no storage costs while your ounces grow every month outside the banking system. If you're serious about protecting your future and building your legacy, head to monetarymetals.com/Peter to get started. One of the best ways to secure your Bitcoin is with a hardware wallet, a physical device that lets you keep your coins offline without internet connection. One of the most trusted names in hardware wallets is CoinKite, maker of the famous block clock. CoinKite devices are made in Canada and they're run by passionate Bitcoiners who've been at this since 2012, back when Bitcoiners were trading in person at swap meets. You can pick up hardware wallets and plenty of other goodies at coinkite.com/ProfSaintAnge. That's CoinKite.com/ProfSaintAnge. Okay, back to our show. A new study finds nearly half of Canadian manufacturers are moving production to America. So much for elbows up, Canada's globalist new slogan to fight Trump by giving him all the manufacturing jobs. A new KPMG survey found that 42% of Canadian manufacturers have either moved production to the U.S. or are planning to. 29% have already moved at least some production. Another 13% are preparing to. 3/4 of those expect to move within 2 years, in other words, during Trump's presidency. Worse, KPMG says the majority of Canadian manufacturers are now operating in what they call, quote, endurance mode, as in survival mode, not expanding, not investing, just running down the factory, apparently counting the days till they can move to America. Nearly 6 in 10 have delayed, reduced, or outright canceled capital investment. 42% have cut R&D. Now, the immediate trigger is Trump's tariffs, which are about to go up this week. But Canada's manufacturing exodus has been a decade in the making, thanks to Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney jacking taxes and red tape while strangling Canada's immense oil reserves 20 times the U.S. on a per capita basis. The deeper problem is that however much Carney wants to elbow up Trump, Canadian manufacturers cannot walk away from America, which makes up almost 1/3 of global consumption, in which geography has been kind enough to plop right next to Canada. 61% of Canadian manufacturers say their business literally cannot survive without access to the U.S. market. So while Carney jets around a dying Europe, in the real world, Canada cannot replace the world's largest consumer market sitting right across the border with a trade mission to Belgium. Gets worse because once the factory moves, the suppliers follow, the engineers, the skilled workers, then the tax base. This is how a country gets hollowed out, one factory at a time. So America gets the jobs, Ottawa gets to commission a study. So as sex, Canada's globalist liberals have been a disaster for regular Canadians, delivering West Virginia wages, San Francisco home prices, and sending Canada's best and brightest fleeing to America. Business investment in Canada has collapsed by 1/3 while it doubled in the U.S. Canada is on the edge of its third recession in 11 years. A recent Bank of Canada study found half of Canada's top 10% people have already fled to the U.S. What's driving them is there's roughly 500,000 college grads in Canada competing for just 80,000 jobs. At this point, a Canadian is 69 times more likely to live in the U.S. than an American in Canada, all while Canada mass imports the third world to where 92% of Canada's population growth, as in 92% of future Canadians, are third world migrants. By all rights, Canada should be one of the richest countries in the world. It's blessed with an educated native-born population that's the envy of the rest of the world. It's swimming in natural resources to where Canadians shouldn't have to pay any taxes like Saudi Arabia, but the globalists have thrown that all away, turning Canada into the very third world it's importing. Freshly minted Fed Chair Kevin Warsh thinks AI will make everything so cheap he'll have to slash rates and print money. So much for tight money Kevin. Now, this could create another everything bubble like we got in 2020, or it could put us back at Bidenflation. So recently, Kevin Warsh called AI, quote, the most productivity-enhancing wave past, present, and future. So we're in the, quote, early innings of a structural decline in prices that allows the Fed to slash interest rates without sparking inflation. Now, this is interesting because Warsh had been seen as the guy who's tough on inflation, which is why gold and silver got crushed when Trump announced him. In fact, Warsh is increasingly looking like an easy money guy. He's been arguing for years now for lower rates, with the inflation canceled by the Fed selling assets, its $7 trillion balance sheet, which it may not be able to do because Wall Street would have a conniption. Warsh calls this, quote, Robin Hood policy, as in helping normies with cheap loans while Wall Street pays for it. But his AI thing suggests Warsh may go even deeper, which is fine if AI delivers on lowering prices. So zooming out, there's two things that drive prices. One is old-fashioned money printing, where Wall Street and the Fed magic up dollars to compete with the dollars you paid for in blood, sweat, and tears. Too many dollars chasing too few widgets. Presto, you need more dollars per widget. Inflation. But there's a second type of inflation, which is real costs. So, for example, if Goldman replaces a $250,000 team of analysts with $10,000 of AI, this lowers prices independent of how many dollars Wall Street and the Fed are printing. That's essentially what happened in the early 2000s when cheap China canceled the Fed, so we got lots of dollars and very little inflation. The question is, will AI and robots deliver the goods again? In fact, if you lower costs fast enough, it lowers prices even if Warsh is going nuts with the money printer. Now, that's not happening yet because beyond some programming, AI is not reliable for most business purposes. It makes stuff up. When it screws up in ways you never imagined. For example, the Wall Street Journal recently installed an AI-powered vending machine in their break room. Staff tricked it into giving everything away for free and then ordering a live fish. But hallucinations are improving fast. Grok, for example, went from 12% hallucination last September to 4% November to under 1% in this latest update. Still, hallucination needs to get close to zero for mass deployment and mass deflation. Now, it's worth noting markets are not expecting deflation, AI or otherwise. Prediction market Kalshi is currently over-undering 3.5% inflation for the year, which is some ways from zero. So what's next? If AI delivers mass deflation, the Fed will slash rates no matter who's in charge, because the Fed is terrified what deflation does to corporations and, ironically, AI companies who are swimming in debt. The last time they slashed, we got the COVID everything bubble, followed by double-digit inflation under Biden. The question is, with AI, is this time different? A word from our sponsor. Stocks and even gold are all over the place. If you're ready to diversify, Abundant Minds makes Bitcoin mining simple, transparent, and human. You can deduct every penny thanks to Trump's big, beautiful bill. It's a 401k for Bitcoin mining. Founded by husband-wife team Bo and Christine Marie Turner after losing $500,000 to broken promises in the mining industry, Abundant Minds was built to protect investors. You own the machines, and they make it turnkey with hosting in their facilities in Oregon. Pricing is clear with one flat monthly fee and no surprises, and they guarantee uptime so you keep earning day in, day out. If you want easy diversification without pressure, learn more at abundantminds.com/Peter to get some of your first Bitcoin mine for free as a gift to my audience. The biggest risk in Bitcoin isn't volatility, it is custody. Because Bitcoin removes the safety net, there is no bank to call, no reset button if something goes wrong. The reality is, most people are not properly set up. They hold Bitcoin but rely on exchanges, incomplete wallet setups, and have no real plan for privacy or inheritance. This is exactly what the Bitcoin way solves. They help you move from exposure to actual ownership, self-custody done right, privacy, inheritance, even running your own node, all set up with you step by step. They never touch your Bitcoin. They're your support team. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Peter to book a free call and go from where you are today to a much stronger setup. Now back to our show. A new study says humans could live healthy to 194 years old, which seems oddly specific, but it is also a long time. Now, lest that sound bonkers, on a recent Peter Diamandis podcast, Elon himself said, quote, "Aging is not that hard a problem with that faraway look Elon gets when he's thinking of starting another company." Now, immortality has been on humanity's to-do list for a while. Isaac Newton chased immortality with alchemy. Han Dynasty China experimented with mercury and arsenic, which turned out to be a bad idea. Gilgamesh searched in vain for the secret to living forever, which was sadly stolen by a snake. The kicker is lots of animals do it already. Lobsters essentially don't age. Naked mole rats live 15 times longer than other rodents, so-called 1,000 years in human terms. Quahog clams are still charming the lady clams at 500 years old. The trick, of course, is figuring how to do it in humans. There's about 8 mechanisms to reverse what's essentially the body's clock, including telomeres, mitochondria, chronic inflammation, so-called zombie cells, which sounds more fun than it is. These are the mechanisms the new study modeled, concluding fixing those could buy lifespans of 194 years. So what happens to the economy? First off, population does not increase as fast as you'd expect. In rich countries today, about 1% of people die per year. That falls to 0.7% in poor countries since they are younger. So population growth goes up 8% in rich countries, roughly doubles, and it goes up about a third in poor countries. In other words, both return to the growth rates of the 1970s. Now, this is great for Japan or Italy, who are currently dying off. It would not make that much difference in Africa. On the economy, you have 3 effects that combine to dramatically raise wealth and growth. First, the preservation of human capital. So ballpark, a third of everything we do today is thrown away for death, a treadmill that replaces experienced neurologists, engineers, and CEOs with unskilled 18-year-olds. Second is more direct. Education and healthcare costs plunge, which are roughly $1 in $4 we spend. And finally, longer careers. If you're living to 194, you are no longer retiring at 65. Now, this may sound depressing, but remember, your assets are compounding for 194 years. So you would generally do grown-up work till 65, then do fun stuff for the next century. Put it all together, and growth and incomes roughly double. The political consequences are fascinating. People get smarter and more conservative today as they get older, so voters would swing hard to the right. For young people, it's a mixed bag, faster growth in wages, but tons of old people hogging up the good jobs. And finally, inequality, as those extra decades of compounding means all boats may rise, but the rich boats rise a lot. So as sex, nature has already solved living forever, we just gotta find it. Science is hopping along, but the main barrier is regulatory. Government's getting in the way. 200-year lifespans may or may not come in time for boomers and Gen X, but it's almost guaranteed for our kids and grandkids unless governments kill it. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and go to petersanons.com for daily videos and in-depth articles with charts and all the gory details. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.